So I was looking in my closet this morning when I'm getting dressed, and I'm like, okay, do I have any secret government agency shirts or government agency shirts? And I'm like, well, I don't have anything that says like FBI or CIA or anything like that. So I'm like, what do I have? What do I have? And I'm like, oh yeah, I have a shirt that's for Shield, for Marvel. So I'm like, that'll work. I'm going to talk about a government agency in this, secret government agency in this, um, covert agency, whatever way you want to put it. Although Shield is somewhat still active in Marvel in the MCU, but it differs a little bit depending on what's going on. But this video is going to be about HYPNOS, or the agency of HYPNOS that we see throughout the course of the Digimon Tamers storyline. And HYPNOS, to a degree, well, apparently it's named after the title of a minor tale by horror author H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft is not for me. I don't do horror. No old gods, things like that. I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm gonna go over here now. I'm gonna pay attention to things that are not that. But that's kind of, I guess, where the name came from. And the head of HYPNOS is Mitsuo Yamaki. Of course, I talked about him quite a bit the other week. And the other two main employees that we know about in HYPNOS are, of course, Riley and Tally. And those three are the main ones that we interact with throughout the course of the series. We see like other ones in the background that are like, dealing with a bunch of the equipment and dealing with, some of the computers and everything like that. But for the most part, the main ones we tend to deal with are Yamaki, Riley, and Tally. And this one is going to be a lot more about kind of the organization itself and the different programs that are used in the system, or in the agency itself. So kind of the history that we get for it is that its original purpose was to monitor the electronic communications of half the Earth as a SIGINT system for the Japanese government. So it's designed to monitor communications and everything. I'm well aware that the government is probably monitoring us to some degree. I'm like, well, I'm not planning treason, so okay. And because of the legal issue of violating privacy, HYPNOS was kept secret from the public. Yeah, that makes sense. As was the real life counterpart project that it's based off of, Echelon, Echelon. Don't ask me. They're acronyms for something, I'm assuming, but I don't know exactly what they are, but it makes sense that the government would have something that's monitoring people. Throughout the course of the first couple of episodes, we're kind of introduced to HYPNOS mostly via Yamaki, Riley, and Tally as they're monitoring the Digimon that keep appearing in the real world, the wild ones, and everything we see as they monitor as Gilmon shows up and as he's kind of born and everything. In what I believe is actually the basement of their frickin' building, if I remember correctly. Also, they're inside of these these buildings pop up a lot in anime, and I don't know exactly what they are. But they're these really big buildings, and like Takata looks at them and it's like, oh, well, those are kind of creepy at one point in time. I think he says in like the first episode when he goes to try to find Gilmon. But that's where HYPNOS is located, and then throughout the first part of the series, as I said, they mainly track the different Digimon as they appear in the real world, and various other wild ones that appear, the anomalies and such that bioemerge into the real world. And they attempt to use various systems, various programs that Yamaki has developed in order to destroy them, and I'll go over those in a minute. But as I said, this is also a government organization, so it does it does answer to, higher ups. Mostly I believe it's the chief of the secretary or something like that that is the main one that Yamaki tends to answer to. And as I mentioned in the Yamaki video, we see at one point him like having to like go through and like talk about the wild ones, the Digimon and stuff like that to like these four other people that are, kind of the ones that are in charge of HYPNOS, that are like in charge of monitoring it and everything. Like Yamaki, I guess, has to get permission to do things from them. And he's basically having a Zoom meeting before Zoom meetings. And so we see that. And then at one point, I do believe they have to send in someone who is, I guess, not as familiar with HYPNOS. And like Yamaki gives this speech to them about explaining to them exactly what HYPNOS is and what it is that they're monitoring in the digital plane and kind of what the wild ones are.
I'm only going to go through this one more time, so do try to pay attention. The network of interlinked electronic devices around the world, the internet, the stock markets, and even wireless communications have essentially created a whole new plane of existence, a digital plane. This system, HYPNOS, monitors that world and records every exchange of information across it, looking for anything out of the ordinary. Simple enough for you?
So at, Yamaki and Riley and Tally, as I stated with Yamaki, he goes and he kind of threatens Staccato and Henry at various points and stuff. And then as it goes on, the two systems that they do end up mainly using are the Yugoth system and the Juggernaut system. And then there's the ARC project, but I'll get to that one too. The first system that we're introduced to that Yamaki has developed is the Yugoth system. And this is essentially, it's based off of, it's a blast of energy, of virtual energy that is designed to destroy the wild ones. So it's supposed to be that, they detect a wild one that's emerging, and then they can send the Yugoth program after it and then use that to destroy it. They do try this a little bit, and we see them try it once, I think, or like once or twice, and it works to a degree, but then the Digimon just kind of finds a way to reform and come back, because I guess it wasn't quite strong enough to destroy it. And Yugoth is apparently a reference to the Cthulhu mythos. So again, that's stuff that goes over my head because I've never read H.P. Lovecraft. I know some of his writing, some of the stuff that he wrote, but I'm just like, nope, I'm good. That's not for me. So I guess Yamaki was a big, Lovecraft fan, I guess. Well, I guess you could make a comparison that, like, the Digimon are a little bit like, I guess, like the old gods arriving into the real world and, like, causing all of this problem. The D-Reaper can definitely have a comparison to that one. Definitely in that regard. And the end result of what happens with Yugoth is that it actually ends up getting attached to Grani as Grani's Yugoth blaster that he has later on. I'll do a whole separate video on Grani. That may actually be the next one, since I haven't determined what the next one is yet. But it might just be Grani, but I'm probably going to do the Monster Makers first. And the family. And then the other system that we see that they tend to use quite a bit is actually the Juggernaut system. Now, I don't know if Juggernaut is an exact reference to, like, I don't know, the X-Men Juggernaut, but it could be. And both Yugoth and Juggernaut are systems that I believe were developed specifically by Yamaki, as in, like, he's the one that wrote the programming for them. So, as I stated in Yamaki's video, he is actually extremely smart in what he does. So he's not like the person that's like the stupid person that doesn't understand technology that's trying to run this government agency that is clearly based around technology. So yeah, these are programs that Yamaki built. And Riley and Tally are the main ones that tend to activate them. So what Juggernaut was, what it was designed to do is, and this is the one that actually gets like the bigger instance that happens in the anime. And what we see is Juggernaut is this system that I believe is designed to act, as I said, like a giant, like a giant bug zapper, where it will draws in, it activates this like digital vortex, and then it's designed to draw in any nearby Digimon. And all data, including Digimon. And it like sucks them in. And then it's designed to, I don't remember if it's supposed to like just straight up destroy them, or if it's supposed to just like send them back to the digital world. But given the fact that during this instance we see, we hear the Digimon just like screaming in pain, and like that really affects Tally, as I said in the previous video with Riley and Tally. it's designed to probably just like straight up destroy the Digimon. And, what ends up happening is they're doing this on top of their building. And what ends up happening is that's when Mihiramon, the Tiger Deva, shows up. And the Juggernaut system itself, the portal that it basically opens, allowed him to pass into the real world and emerge. And that actually ends up like setting Yamaki off because he's like, frick, it didn't work. And like, it's actually caused something to show up here. So that's not helpful to me. And so, we see that Mihiramon actually manipulated that into actually helping him get to the real world. And so we see some of that. And Juggernaut is eventually upgraded to help, try to deal with the Devas. They try to use it against, I believe they try to use it against Indramon, I believe, which is the horse Deva. I think they try to use it against him. But it didn't actually do, I think it like caused some damage to him, but then he just reformed. So while the Juggernaut system is powerful, it's not quite what they need it to be. And during that time frame is when the monster makers actually end up getting involved. And Yamaki has gone and he's found John Yu, and he's found Henry's father, and he's found the other monster makers that helped develop what were initially the prototypes for Digimon. And he, brings them into HYPNOS, and he explains to them what's going on. And they actually help with, I think they help with upgrading Juggernaut. And part of Juggernaut is also used when they use Juggernaut specifically. They use Juggernaut specifically during the final battle with the D-Reaper, because they take Juggernaut and they implant it, or they download it into Terriermon. And that final incarnation of it is what's used to help them, when Henry and Terriermon spin really, really fast inside of this vortex that's connecting the D-Reaper that's in the real world with the D-Reaper that's in the digital world. And Henry and Terriermon are spinning incredibly fast inside of it. That helps activate Juggernaut. And then they're able to make this, kind of vortex thing that like reverse, kind of like de-evolves the D-Reaper. And it like, sucks it in and it forces it back down to its original code. Unfortunately, this exposure to the Juggernaut system is what also makes the Digimon have to return to the digital world. That, causes them to be sucked back into the digital world at the end of the series. When they all shrink back down into their, in training forms and then go through. And so we see that, so that, it's like this final version of it is actually quite powerful in regards to how they use it. So we see some of that. I think we also see some bits where some of the other Devas were like somewhat affected by the Juggernaut system, but they ended up still, coming back anyway. And the Tamers were still the ones that destroyed him. Destroyed said Deva. I was trying to remember if Vicaramon had any effect on that. I don't. That's the thing, is that I do not remember if they used part of the Juggernaut system in regards to trying to deal with Vicaramon, or if in activating part of the Juggernaut system that had resulted in Vicaramon, the giant boar Deva, allowing him to appear. Other parts of what HYPNOS is designed to do is that it's supposed to act as also a cover-up organization, as in anything about the Digimon that appears, they are supposed to come up with a story as to what happened. Cover story to prevent, the existence of Digimon from becoming common knowledge in the real world, particularly to the public. Certain aspects of other government agencies probably know about them, but in actuality, in regards to like the population of Japan as a whole, Digimon is just like a card game or like a video game that we see them play, that we see the kids playing. They don't realize that the Digimon are actually real until everything happens with Vicaramon. And that's where HYPNOS kind of, sidesteps its job, and it's just like, well, we can't hide the fact that a giant frickin' pig just ransacked part of the city. We can't, like, hide that there's too much video evidence and footage and, physical evidence of everything that happened, that we can't really stop that. Also, the military got involved and missiles were involved. So yeah, you can't really hide that. But I know at one point, like, they try to take the like the leadership role away from Yamaki, and then that doesn't work because like none of the others can figure out how the system is supposed to work, even with Riley and Tally there. They can't figure out how to run the system exactly because Yamaki, I don't know if it's supposed to be Yamaki is specifically the one that designed the full system of HYPNOS, but I don't think so. I think it was probably other government scientists or computer programmers that like designed HYPNOS, and then Yamaki was the one that was best fit to run the system. And then he, as I said, he's the one that developed Yugoth and Juggernaut. And then, as I stated, they also end up having the monster makers come and work with them, and they help with the main thing that they help with is the ARC project, because you know, as I stated before, Takato and his group go to the digital world in order to try to help Terriermon. And the monster makers had actually been using their knowledge to try to develop a successful, you know, anti-Digimon weapon. And I think part of that is what got combined with the Juggernaut system, and that's what they used to defeat the D Reaper. And what we see is during the time frame that the kids are in the digital world, they, you know, after Yamaki has, like, you know, explained to the parents where they actually are and has actually gone through and, you know, has gotten his groove back, I guess, in regards to getting his butt motivated by Riley. The dog is jingling. Rainy! Rainy! No dig. No dig on the bed. He's sitting on my mom's bed, probably attempting to dig. I think he's calmed down. And what we see that happens is, you know, the monster makers and Riley and Tally and Yamaki are the ones that really work on designing the ARC, which of course the ARC is then used to then send to the digital world, so that way the Digidestined or the Tamers can then board the ARC and then ride the ARC back to the real world and actually keep them safe on the way back. And I'll go a lot more into detail on the ARC program probably when I talk about the monster makers, but also when I do the Grani video, since Grani is what, you know, comes from the ARC. You know, the ARC eventually turns into Grani. But, you know, so they're the ones that develop the ARC and design like the pathway that it has to go through to get to the digital world, and they use HYPNOS systems in order to keep an eye on that. Also, as I stated in several of the videos, when Takato corrupt digivolves Gilmon all the way up to Megidramon, HYPNOS systems pick up on like this huge disturbance in the digital world. So that implies that, well, as we know, and I'll go over this more when I do a video about the digital world itself that's in the Tamers world. In the Tamers world, they can monitor to a degree certain influxes from the digital world, and Megidramon's power in and of itself that he, you know, that is coming off of him is so hazardous to the digital world itself that it actually causes issues in the real world. And they're able to like detect that power happening at that time, that you know, disturbance in the digital world was so strong that HYPNOS could detect it in the real world. So we do see that. As I said, they developed the ARC program, which is, of course, the ARC that then goes and gets the kids, and that was developed with the monster makers. And then, you know, the children are brought back to the real world, safe and everything. And then, of course, that's when the D Reaper invades. And the D Reaper ends up invading to the at the point where part of its center is actually around the building that HYPNOS had occupied, and that results in the HYPNOS having to leave the building, like, you know, scramble out of there as fast as they can. I'm pretty sure helicopters were involved because they have to get a bunch of their equipment out of there as well and get them to, I think they end up in the Tokyo Metropolitan Government Building is supposedly where they end up. That's their, you know, new headquarters there. Also, they have like a van that they drive around in because like Yamaki goes and talks to the military at one point to try to convince them to not attack the D Reaper. They partially listen a little bit. And what we end up seeing is, you know, the monster makers are there working with HYPNOS, with Riley and Tally and Yamaki and everything, and the other miscellaneous scientists that we never get names for. We see them working with them, and of course that's where they learn more about what was going on with the D Reaper. That's where they end up developing, the final version of Juggernaut that is then put into Terriermon that they then use to de-evolve the D Reaper, and such. And so it's a lot of all these different scientists working together and government agencies communicating with each other. And as I said, yes, the agency continues to go on even after the series technically finishes because, I don't know, I guess like they're like, well, we probably should keep monitoring these Digimon just in case any of them decide to come back. And I'm assuming they, as I stated, I think in a different video, in the Yamaki video, I think they do, I feel for headcanon that they do continue to work with the monster makers and the tamers, so that way they are then able to actually be able to like successfully do their job. Like as I said, like use the HYPNOS system to track where the Digimon are coming in from. And if it is a Digimon that intends to cause harm, then they can have, the tamers, Takata, Rika, Henry, whichever one of their friends go and deal with said Digimon. If it's one that intends to cause harm. If it's one that's there by accident or that's there and it doesn't actually want to cause harm, then maybe they can try to figure out a way to send it back to the digital world so it can be safe, or I guess, I don't know, befriend the dang thing, I guess. I don't know. So there's that possibility there. The other instance that we see is, of course, in the Runaway Locomon movie, the second movie. Yeah, HYPNOS has nothing to do with the first movie, which I just find somewhat odd because the first movie ends up actually being about, like these virtual pets that actually end up causing a lot of problems in the real world because there's a virus inside of them. It's part of the whole plot of the movie, and I'll go over that when I do like a review of the movie itself. But these pets end up causing V-pets cause a bunch of problems, and you would think that would be something that HYPNOS would be monitoring. That they would be like, oh, what are these things? Oh, we need to keep an eye on these things, and like actually try to figure out a way to stop them. But they're not involved in the first movie at all. And then the bits we do see them in the second movie is that when everything starts happening with Locomon, Yamaki goes to like the I don't know exactly where he goes. He goes to like, I guess like the train station headquarters place or whatever, and he goes there and like explains to them, oh, this train is not a train, it's a Digimon, it's called Locomon, and it's this, it's trying to it's going as fast as it can because its intent is to open a portal. And Yamaki, and then through communicating with Riley and Tally at the base, because they probably reestablished HYPNOS inside of the towers, communicates with Rika and Takato and Henry and informs them of what's going on with Locomon, even though like Takato and Rika are already on the train when he calls them, but still. And we see that happen, and we see him try to help them figure out how to stop Locomon. Like he works with the train people to try to help them stop Locomon, or at least slow him down to a degree. And of course, then it's revealed that Parasimon was controlling Locomon and everything. And Yamaki's like, oh, okay, well, I guess it wasn't his fault. And they stop all the Locomon, or they stop all the Parasimon and everything from coming to Earth. Yeah, they end up doing this without really any help from HYPNOS anyway. So it's like things probably would have gone the same way regardless of whether or not HYPNOS was there, in that regard, which I just find kind of funny because it's just like Yamaki and Riley and Tally, and like they all these other, like they had like a bunch of the train people like helping them like try to like fix get the train like derailed or whatever, or slowed down or whatever, and like it didn't really make much of a difference in the long run, which is just like, well, they tried but they couldn't really do anything. Yeah, that's just kind of funny. I love that. Yeah, there's a few bits that they do have in like extra things that were done in the series where it is very possible that, as I stated before, the unspoken irony is that because of the systems and stuff that Yamaki developed in regards to not so much Yugoth, but definitely Juggernaut, that results in that helping develop portals, and that results in the Digimon being able to come through. Main example is Mihiramon, the Tiger Deva, coming through when they first activate Juggernaut. And there's a few other things that like were like talked about, but they didn't actually put them in the series in regards to different things involving Yamaki and HYPNOS and such. But yeah, there's not too much. As I stated, I don't really think there's. I would love it if they ended up doing like a redo. Well, not a redo of the series, but like a continuation of the series where we see older versions of the kids and seeing them actually work like with Yamaki. I'm not saying that like Takato, Rika, and Henry and the rest of the group are gonna grow up and become like HYPNOS agents with like their Digimon, where they all have like, where it's like a Men in Black situation where it's like, they all have the nice black suits or whatever. Although Susie's suit would probably be pink in all honesty because she's Susie. But they all have the nice suits and everything and the sunglasses, and like they show up like they're like their Digimon have like matching suits, because I'm sorry, the idea of Gilmon in like an attempted suit or like a vest is just kind of adorable, and I believe that Renamon can pull off that look very well and look very threatening in the process, with like the sunglasses and everything, that like they show up whenever anything's happening. That involves Digimon and they have to like deal with that. I would love that. That would be adorable. I don't think that would happen, but I would love it if they did that with HYPNOS. That's just like headcanon of like something that happens, that like they help with that if necessary. And that like I just kind of have it as headcanon that like the monster makers continue to work with HYPNOS in order to try to monitor the digital world and monitor stuff like that. I don't think they would have actually ended up being able to communicate with the digital world, because that would involve having to communicate with the sovereigns, and Chuchaomon would have no part in that. Azulonmon probably would, possibly the other two would as well, but I don't think that would go well in regards to trying to monitor the digital world, specifically with like dealing with the Digimon, but at least helping to determine like where the Digimon are going to emerge, and then determining if they're a threat. That might be helpful. Although the Tamers can just use their their Digivices to like determine where the Digimon are anyway, because it'll like tell them how to find it. So again, slightly irrelevant slightly redundant HYPNOS. So oh well. That's what I have for this. As I stated, I don't know exactly what the next video is going to be for this series, but it's either going to be some of the Digimon Tamers families or the Monster Makers. But I'll go from there since I haven't made that full decision yet. But that's what we have. I thank you for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!